Well, so welcome, and thank you for taking this Friday out of your day to give us your expertise and obviously your experience at Day Integrated, and looking at how you're connecting the dots between the many initiatives that are before schools right now, but what kind of things you have done to be integrating the work between PBIS and maybe Care Team, maybe SEL. But just share with us what you've experienced and how you're making the work smarter, not harder, with the many initiatives before you.
I'm Kathleen Choate. Is this good to be just okay? I'm a BCBA for the county and spend a lot of time supporting all of the programs that the ESC runs. And so spending a lot of time at Day Integrated Learning Center. And I'll let Jeff introduce himself and maybe talk a little bit more about like this program, and then we can dive like just some basics.
Okay, I'm Jeff Farrar, the building principal for the Stark County ESC at Day Integrated Learning Center. In this facility, we have three. It is a public separate facility. Let's say first, we're now currently providing a service to 18 school districts in Stark County and surrounding counties, with a population of about 77 students, and all of them placed here generally for intensive behavioral needs. We have 3 autism units covering grades K through 8. We have 5 ED units covering grades K through 8, and 2 post-high school programs that have students that have socially graduated, have now accepted a diploma under MD services for that transitional life skills readiness programming.
Yeah. So just to give a little background in terms of when I started here, there was a lot of like parts and pieces and behavioral sort of like supports in place, but not necessarily like a building wide system. So, I'd get, we'd kind of work through individual kind of requests and issues, those kind of like high flyer students sort of piece by piece, and then sort of decided, okay, hey, let's try to think of a way that we can do something a little more systemic for all the kids, right? They're coming here. It's pretty significant that they've left their districts. And so like, we really need to hone in on not only like the behavioral expectation piece, but also that social emotional piece, because they obviously all go, hand in hand. So, in doing that, in the, I think it was a 2019-2020 year, we implemented our kind of tier 1 system for PBIS across the program. So that included essentially recording data on students, initially teaching at the 3 expectations within the building, and then also looking at that every half an hour for every student. So it kind of goes hand in hand. That's our reinforcement piece. So every 30 minutes, a student gets like basically a yes or a no if they engage in the expectation. So that's safe, responsible, respectful. We kind of chose that because I feel like that's kind of a hits, we can umbrella kind of hit all of the different expectation, elements of those expectations within kind of those matrices. And then it also like connects to a lot of district PBIS expectations too. So always with the idea that students might be ideally going back to an LRE or, and still have familiarity. Did you want to add something there?
Yes. I was going to mention a little bit of the history of the initial piece where we saw this. We were like, oh, this, and I really was like, oh, Kathleen, this is awesome. This is really, really good. Keep going with this. Initially, we had some new staff coming in. Kathleen was new, and we had a new teacher out at Tuslaw. And so we went into an SSTM, was a behavioral support success. I can't remember the name of the series. And we trialed, Kathleen set up a system for a teacher, which felt like a pilot. That turned into the data collection piece minus a PBIS matrix. The data, but strictly the data collection piece with the expectations that it looked like that we were looking to exhaust, then moved over and the word got out. So we had a teacher that here at Day that wanted to implement it classroom wide. Still no PBIS matrix really, but just having classroom expectations in general at a classroom level. So I think a lot of the success where it got to the point of what Kathleen was just explaining was that it went from trialing with one student that they considered a tier 2 student at Tuslaw to a classroom at Day. And then once I think the big part of the success in this here for Day is that we piloted it and then staff saw the benefit of it. So it wasn't we weren't enforcing or trying to promote something that didn't already have a successful point that a classroom level teacher and a parapro could go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You got to see the growth we're having with students now and how we can identify behaviors that we need to exhaust. And so that really that was like the kind of the first steps. And then the process of it, and I always talk about it, it's like this really cool marriage of, I had a pretty extensive background, trained by Perry, and was on the committee at Lehman Middle School for Canton City, when Canton City was trained by Perry, on building PBIS matrices. What I didn't have was, and so in doing that, and a lot of the things that kind of I see crumble sometimes, is you have a matrix, you have expectations, but there's the element of having to truly make it accountable piece is the question. And so the really cool marriage in there is like Kathleen is the behavioral science person, is like, oh my gosh, you can do that. This is cool. And then it was her suggestion, hey, we can use these expectations in a traditional matrix to attach the data. And I had to wrap my head around that for a while. And she's like, no, Jeff, we need to have meetings about talking about what our expectations are going to be building wide, and then train people on data collection. And that's where it kind of all came together and meshed to where it is now.
Yeah, so we use that data for all kids all day, and that that ties into all these kind of different forms of reinforcement in terms of the teaching and reteaching, reinforcing, and using that to drive information. So that's kind of where we can sort of maybe connect to the care team kind of history, and the way that we sort of merged care team. We actually call our biweekly meetings data care meetings. So initially when we started, we had myself and an FSS was kind of part of the building. And again, this is before we implemented the PBIS system, in an official way. But so we were starting to have those care team meetings, which I feel like in itself was really valuable, because it was like a time to come together, have really focused discussion, or at least try. A lot of times, you kind of get in that, the high, again, sort of the high flyer, the high need kind of students sort of end up taking a lot of that time. Right. Mm-hmm. But just asking those questions, understanding a little more deeper family, history, situations, like that stuff that we don't always know about, and how important that started really kind of coming to light with those meetings. And a lot of times we were talking behavior in the school setting too, but not necessarily in a systematic way. We also really connected with our Conquest counseling services too, so they've always been a big part of that. So we were sort of running for the first year of PBIS tier 1 implementation, we had care meetings and we had data meetings, and they were two separate meetings. And one, it was a lot of meetings. And while there was always plenty to talk about, we kind of end up talking about the same stuff. And I feel like there's reason to sort of we ended up merging them the next year. So year 2 of PBIS, we turned them into kind of what they still are, which is data care. So it kind of combos those two. We look at PBIS data, and then we also go through the questions that a care team or an FSS might also be asking in terms of just the other sort of needs, physiological, type of things that students are really, that we might need to look into a little deeper. And that's where Conquest has also really been supportive.
Not that it was intended, but what I see that has worked out well with the structure of the meetings, and then going to having a meeting every 10 days for units, is that 10-day period was enough time to trial something tier 2, trial plans, and to allow to get accurate data, in the sense that we know the first 2 days of plans, we might have more escalated behavior. There's going to be a burst. And so we're going to get some grumbling back. We're going to get some, and we even joke about it. You know why we wait 10 days? Because so you're going to complain about this plan for 2 days and tell us the plan's horrible and it's not going to work. And what are we doing? Give it 7 more days until we meet. Get to that 10th day and go, oh my gosh, when you're looking at the ones and zeros in the data, you are starting to see those trends that work or not, and what we need to adjust and revisit. So that's been exciting, to the point where our meetings now have become more sitting around, and I shouldn't say sitting around casually. There is a step in there when we were talking in 2-tier plans, and if a student does have a tier 2 plan, we'll show you those forms of what they look like, where staff are starting to promote hypotheses on, this is the behavior we have. Let's write a hypothesis and trial it for 10 days. What's exciting is now they're doing that. I'm really trying to push the phase myself out and be like, I'm going to sit back and listen, because I can sometimes talk too much and get excited in meetings. So, but it's fun to sit back and watch them actually just hypothesize on the behavior and write a formal hypothesis.
So just to kind of like give a better description. So ideally before the meeting occurs, teachers are filling this, like go through this Google form for every single student.
One form is a separate form is made for each class, and they're all merged together into a sheet of tabs.
So there's usually like a section above this that actually lists the student names from that class's roster. And so we've just tried to give it a little bit more of that format so that we make sure that we actually really are covering every kid. Because like I said, it is so easy to like, focus on, or maybe who had a really tough day, or, you know what I mean? I feel like the people that are really, kind of prominent in our brain, which still, kind of happens. But, we go through that, how their PBIS data. Oh, sorry. I guess I kind of. I looked. Okay. This is okay. Sorry. Okay, on camera. But you're going great. Just in terms, I felt like you kind of spoke to like how we determine, like how we implement the tier 2 intervention and expect that those would be put in place for fidelity, to fidelity for 10 days. But how we get to the decision that a student might need that is based in some of these questions. So like, did their score, their daily score, their weekly score increase or decrease? Why? And we also look in the good way too, when we're having these meetings, or the positive, right? Like if it's continuing to increase or stay really strong, like is a transition perhaps something that we're going to start considering, kind of that even better than a tier 1 kind of, going in that direction. But, and does the team think that a tier 2 plan's needed? What are we going to trial? We use that, again, that PBIS data. We look into like incident report data since the last meeting, and then kind of where we need to focus in terms of like that PBIS matrix language.
And I don't know if we'll get to presenting the matrix and how our matrix looks. We probably will, but those boxes there that Kathleen's arrow is on now are the general across all settings. And we break it down by different settings in the building, and defining those undefined areas in the building. But these are the general prompts that we are collecting data on. And so the reason we structured it this way is, and it actually came out of being a part of the TBT teams in Kansas City at Hartford. They actually give credit. Dave Thompson's the one that created the TBT forum there, to have a 20-minute collegial conversation, the form we called it. So this is really based off of that. And the idea is that when you fill out this form, what it allows us to do, and I can post an example of that when we're done looking through all the questions here, how that looks in a sheet. Because now what it does is over a series of weeks, and it doesn't, at first it's like, why are we filling out a form for every kid? Well, when you get into 10, 12, 13 weeks of school, now you can A to Z that. And well, if you know about how sheets work, that if you don't type that kid's name exactly the same every time, it's not going to A to Z it. If you don't, so sometimes you say, oh, they're not using neutral or kind words. Or if you say they're using unacceptable language, that's not going to A to Z. So we're following those trends of things that we're looking to exhaust based on the PBIS matrix of expected behaviors in correlation to the data points. And because it's in a form, you don't have any option other than click it consistently the same way. So it helps make that data accurate. So for this, we were actually doing it on a just kind of in handwritten notes in a journal, per se, in a 3-ring binder. And so it felt like it really tightened that data up and made the meeting go faster to say, hey, teachers, we were having meetings that are lasting over an hour, which sometimes felt like that downward spiral. Like, are we ever going to get out of this hole in this meeting because it's 3 o'clock and teachers leave and we're here until 3:30? But honestly, we're running these meetings in 40 minutes, 45 minutes. We're done way before an hour going through every student in the roster.
So that's like the PBIS section and how that relates to the matrix. And then we do include these other kind of the care team related questions that an FSS, maybe would focus on. And we still kind of touch on those points again, just, in terms of like basic need concerns and, personal or hygiene needs. We have some other questions in here related to like supplemental things that might be beneficial to a student, like classes or clubs, which like I would say before, just a cool element that like, if you were to ask us 4 years ago, like, are we going to, try to put in classes and clubs? And we'd be like, no, we're putting out fires like all day. So like the idea of being like, yeah, we're going to promote and support these other cool things that are really beneficial for kids. We might have been like, that sounds really, maybe too overwhelming or hard to like implement, versus now it's like we have all of these kind of ways to like, I don't know, just really inform like these types of needs for students, but then also use their PBIS data to say like, hey, in order to show us that you're ready for kind of this next step, we need to see that we're like adhering to these expectations in the classroom setting, because doing it here shows us we're ready to do these other like cool and awesome, like fun things. So that's just been like a neat element of like being able to like expand and enhance like opportunities for students that we maybe were kind of keeping in these more like, not keeping, but kind of like struggling to kind of get out of those more controlled classroom environments. So, and again, this just notes questions about you needing to assist the family or, other ways that we can support student success. Because as much as we do want to focus on data, there's obviously a lot of other elements that we need to take into consideration for kiddos, and not always as measurable as, my behavior analysis heart would like. So, so that's, kind of that form that we use. And like I said, we do those every 2 weeks. And so that, leads way to perhaps, to monitor and to trial interventions and then reflect on how those are going.
Can I go to the sheet real quick?
Sure.
Well, okay, so this is a sheet here for a class. If you see all the across the bottom there, you have all the tabs for each unit. And so what you have, just because of the nature of a Google form to a sheet, is you have across the top frozen your questions. And down the side, you have a timestamp. There are things that we type in a meeting. We type in the participants, and then we type in a lot of information about the care section, because Conquest might have something to contribute. Other factors to consider. And do tier 2 plans. Sometimes, where you get stuck right there and we talk about where we're at. So I did, just for the sake of what we're doing, block out these students' names here. But you can kind of see how this works. So generally in the meeting, what we're doing is we're running through from left to right across the column down the row. So we're going, row number 2, running through this left to right, get to the end, boom. Row number 3, go through the end. And then sometimes in the middle of it, I might go up to column C and click A to Z. And A to Z it, and then go, okay, where are we at? And now those are the great conversations, because then in that screen, you can look at the data and go, wait a minute, this kid's been decreasing for the last 3 meetings. That's 6 weeks of time now. So we're tier 2. And we can revisit those things and look at that way.
Yeah. So we know, like Jeff mentioned, seeing data decrease, seeing incident report data, maybe that student's kind of like maintaining at a percentage, but it's like far below the class or below the class average. So like that's, not typical in terms of like what we're seeing for our tier 1 kiddos. So using that information, and then again, other types of, maybe significant stuff going on for that student that we might say like, hey, they would really benefit from some one-on-one time with a counselor, kind of proactively scheduled, maybe like, that's not necessarily like already built in. And then just to kind of speak to tier 3 interventions, these aren't necessarily very frequent in this setting, just because I feel like we do have so many built-in environmental supports at the tier 1 level, hence, kind of the nature of this building. Tier 2 plans are pretty frequent in terms of, trialing some increased reinforcement for students, or, some of those proactive breaks or, input or whatnot. But if we do need a tier 3 intervention, that would be kind of at the point where an official referral would kind of come through, just like districts might do to me or someone on my team. And we might go through that, kind of that formal FBA process and try to really dive into like some, a more individualized plan, or like an ETR comes up or something like that, where we're like, okay, we're seeing a ton of, significant incidences or something like that. So that's kind of where our tier 3 is, as it should be, pretty low, I guess, in numbers throughout a year. But, that's kind of the process that we might go to for that.
Another piece of this correlation too, and we don't really, I mean, it's pretty, we may have to make a copy to look at this correlation because it would skew the sheet. When you're looking at the increase or decrease, when you look over the side here, that because we're looking at all behavior, a lot of this data here is based off of matrix data, and we can look at that matrix so you have an understanding how we get these data points. There's another correlation that's happening here where you're watching this data and we're watching those expectations, but then we're going over here and over to the right. Like if you go over and look at column J, does the student have any basic need concerns? Food, clothing, shelter, answer or no for consideration. So those type of things, when you get into that, is there a relationship? Is there a trauma relationship? Is there an environmental change as a extenuating factor past school that we have to look, and that's where we really look at tier 2, and Kathleen does a really good job about it. I understand this is trauma, but this is also a behavior from that trauma. So what are we going to do to exhaust that behavior based on our matrix? So it always goes back to that matrix behavioral science, but we are considering those outside factors too of, is there divorce in the family? Was there a family fire? Is there a foster placement change? Was there a loss of a family member? Any of those type of things to see if there are trends that are related to that. And so, which also a lot of times, and we're heavy on RAP, it may lead to RAP referrals and looking for more intensive services that we can bring in to support a family.
Yeah, and I feel like, again, we do talk a lot about like those basic matrix expectations, but always with the idea that we're promoting and trying to teach students like appropriate ways to express like different needs if they can't adhere to those expectations. So that's always going to be part of our kind of model. So like understanding that like things are going to, how we can better support a student, whether that's, something as maybe basic as a social story for, when things don't go a student's way. And that's, again, kind of pairing with ComQuest and, the whole team comes together and things like that. But focusing in on those things that it's like, it's okay when you can't be safe or responsible or respectful, but like, what are some better ways to manage those feelings? So that's, I think, and it is responsible to ask for a break, and it is responsible to go to your safe spot that we've kind of already designed, outside of crisis. It's not, ideally not so much, to run out of the building or, and things like that. So, once we kind of see those, kind of maybe unexpected, really significant responses, we want to kind of hone in on how to help them better serve that function and try to have a better understanding as to why too. So again, we do, we start our pretty intensive training at the beginning of the year for staff. And we're always kind of like trying to adjust. We look at the matrix as a staff to like say, like, does this still not make sense, but kind of like cover all of the things? Are we, and we did a lot of sort of tweaks and adjustments, and we always sort of review it. We have monthly just PBIS meetings as a program where we look at the matrix like every time, and we talk about, are there, does this still kind of cover the things and kind of just take into fact all those considerations into the just that meeting and try to understand if we do need to make changes at all. So that a lot of our training piece for staff comes at the beginning of the year, but also, as soon as we decide that we might need to do a more intensive intervention, we obviously, try to help those teams be supported, know what they're doing, how to best, kind of implement those things. And then every month when we have PBIS meetings, if we've kind of noticed that we've swayed away from some of our, positively framed prompting for staff, we revisit that. So, hey, remember, we refer, it's not, avoiding those no, stop, don't, and hey, we use neutral and kind language in this building or in this classroom, things like that. So I feel like we're always kind of like hitting on and trying to like organically talk through like our processes, even if it's not like formal training per se, when we come together. So just to kind of mention that. But if you want to speak to, the matrix is.
So we didn't reinvent anything here. Safe, responsible, respectful, success in the classroom, success in public areas, which would define a fire drill, a field trip, recess, anywhere where somebody in public can see you. Success in the restroom, success in vehicles, and that also includes where I do a lot of building plans or extending our plan here. to support a transportation department. That could be a challenging thing. Now we have a moving vehicle with students from different classes and programs in the same area and in the hallways. A lot of them repeat. And we kind of have little discussions about that, but I think it's deliberate to have them repeat for the purpose of knowing that is an expectation there. So quick, just little things, and I will go to the page before it, but I want to talk about some of the prompts here, just kind of put them out there. When we're looking under safety is a high level concern, and there aren't prompt parameters, and Kathleen can talk to how prompt parameters work a little bit too, and that. So that's a no nonsense. This is where there's a hard line on things. Body parts itself, expected body movements, because doing something like even trying to be silly and hiding behind a door and jumping out and like trying to spook somebody can be an antecedent. But also gang signs can be antecedents. Posturing can be antecedents. Staying in your assigned area. Now that's always something we spend a lot of time defining these things with staff, because that doesn't mean a safety point is not getting up out of your seat and going to throw something away while the teacher's instructing. That's more following your schedule. Staying in your assigned area is an elopement, where you create an unsafe situation where staff do not have eyes on. Or socially safe language. So that's language separate from like when you look over respectful, like neutral, kind words or expected language. Socially safe language is making a targeted comment to inflict self-harm on somebody else, or something that would deliberately escalate somebody by threaten, or it could also be an insult or a prompt that somebody would say about a family member or something like that. So when you go to respectful, and if it's kind of behind Kathleen in the screen there, or for volume would be the next one down there, where we define our volume. Now, in all of this, the classrooms where this is the most solid and successful are the classrooms where the staff all use this language all day. This is how they talk to children. And we train people to talk to children this way. So we're not telling students that what you said wasn't nice. The prompt is, it's a reminder to use neutral and kind words. The prompt, and this is the one I always like to think that's ironic for words, tone, and volume. If a student is in a room being too loud, it could be escalated, or it could just be general excitement, is for a staff member to say, "You're being too loud." Ironically, the staff member is the one being too loud right now, probably not using the appropriate tone. And they're not using the prompt. So we have prompts set for 0, meaning no talking. 1 is a whisper. 2 is a people near you can't hear you. Only people near you can hear you. And what's the third one? It's kind of dark right there.
3 is entire class can hear you.
Entire class can hear you. And 4 is outside voice. So we have staff that they point them out. They will move arrows to posters in the classroom showing this is where we're at now. And so the reminder, we're at a 1 right now, or those type of things. So that has helped so much, because it's really taken out the challenge for a student to go, I'm not being too loud. We're not talking about that. We're not defining culture. We're not defining what an environment is like outside of school for you in school. In this moment right now, a 1 is defined as a whisper, and we are at a 1.
And those are part of like our initial teaching. All of this is being taught in further detail. Like, a student, how we teach tone in different grade levels and things like that is like, I feel like looks a little different. So that's certainly like kind of, I guess, sort of level to like where, those students kind of are to kind of better understand these terms.
Responsible. Let's do some things real quick. Following your schedules. That would be the spot to where if you are out of your seat doing something you ought not to be doing, the reminder said, hey, you're not supposed to be walking over there. Now, remember, what is our schedule right now? Or the prompt to say, our schedule right now is to be in our seat. And that's because that was a clear expectation set before that prompt was given. Keeping appropriate distance. And sometimes that's not necessarily something that is an escalated situation. It's more of a social understanding and reading social cues that we can prompt students to work on, how to just present yourself as you're growing towards being an adult. And keeping hand supplies clean. We've made some adjustments. We had a 4th column last year for healthy, and we felt that we could just put that, hey, let's stay clean and socially safe from each other, and we're good. And so we've trialed some things there. If I can talk a little bit to this, and I'll let you explain to like how you design this. So when I'm talking to parents about this in school districts for tours, I will use the example under respect, and for the first two bullets, neutral kind words and expected language. So it may be at 8:30 in the day. Notice that there are no circles underneath safe, because that is a no-fly zone. If you lope, it is a no. So maybe at 8:30 in the morning, and with all these understood, a student using a pencil, their pencil breaks, and he looks at the teacher and says, "Your pencils are junk." Well, that's not neutral or kind. So what the staff would do is say, "Remember, we're using neutral and kind words." They're not saying, "You don't talk to me like that. You don't say that. You said you're not using neutral and kind words." So they color in one of those little zeros there. It's not really a zero. It's just a little area to mark in as a prompt parameter reminder. So you can put in a circle. Maybe 10 minutes later in 8:30, the student's pencil breaks again, and they scream. This time they don't say anything neutral kind. They just scream, and you're at a 2 in a classroom, and they're using their level 4 outside voice, and say, "Remember, your voice is a 2 right now. We are at a 2 during this activity." And so the staff can circle in another prompt. So what you're doing is you're getting 3 prompts in the no. And we spent an extensive amount of time having phenomenal conversations with staff about what constitutes a prompt parameter. So here's what I didn't see coming that's really worked well for us again. I'd say that a lot. It's like, oh, in hindsight, that worked out really good. If the student would respond to the teacher would say, "Remember, we are at a level 2 right now." And the student said, "I am at a level 2." The teacher in this situation is not to color in the third circle, because it's the same isolated incident. You've already, in all our best efforts to direct a student to using the PBIS matrix, us confronting them can be an antecedent. We are already in the situation, this is the coolest part. Now, as we get to talk about staff, is that it does not let your ego get away. So what we're having then is we're noticing a decrease in staff of all parapro and teachers going, "You're not going to talk to me like that." They are talking to you like that. You're in an escalated situation. So professionally, you're going to treat it as the same issue. So you're not going to go, "I'm going to give you a no." And that's the other part. We're not giving yeses, we're giving nos. And once students start to catch on to that, they're like, "Oh, you're just collecting data." So out of all the empathetic things that we do, at all the greatness that comes out of day, it's really based off of a matter of fact 0 or 1. And I would tell you, I would have never thought 4 years ago, 5 years ago in my life, that all the decisions made a day are going to come down to a 1 or a 0. But that drives the entire 10-day cycle of our data care meetings. It drives the sheet. It drives all our decision making, comes down to what you're looking at right now.
And when he refers to that, like when we actually enter the data into like our data entry, like if they get a yes for that interval, it's a 1 or a 0, because at the end of the day, right, we have this percentage. We'd hope it'd be all 1s, because all yeses is 33 out of 33. I can kind of show, because this is not if you stop sharing, like just for a quick reference to this, because I have a students up. Oh wait, it doesn't want me. It's not being weird. But just for like reference, like, so I just have a students up that similar, that's kind of goes through like the dates and then the times, and then at the end of the day, they're kind of their percentage. So that's again that information. So it breaks down each time period and then those expectations. So just kind of for further reference to that, of how we kind of develop the those data sheets and how we enter them to get like really, and so then we can actually say like, okay, where are they losing points? What expectation is it that seems to be more challenging for them? And again, when we're kind of developing plans, and then maybe time trends or location trends or things like that. So just to kind of give further reference to that. But yeah, so that's kind of like our data system in a nutshell, and how we kind of, we look again at daily percentages. Some classrooms don't dive into those more specified data sheets. They just kind of look at it as a whole. For a tier 2 student, we kind of start, that's part of the process, would be looking at their data in that more specified way. And then some classes just do that that kind of more in-depth spreadsheet for all their kiddos that drives some like IEP goals and things like that too, in terms of like, because almost I guess every kid here that would generally have a behavior goal, and hence some kids only have that, you know what I mean, here, which is kind of unique too. So again, that's just another way that we use data to kind of inform the whole kind of system and process and things like that. So I think that kind of covers a lot of what are we using.
I think another part, and I'm going to go back to the buy-in. That's a lot of work. That data entry is a lot of work. And I think we found where staff believe in it is they have seen through evidence that putting that work in to do that data and to reflect on the data proactively saves them time later. We're dropping escalation.
Mm-hmm.
We had a phenomenal drop in any type of hands-on engagement with students. We are now starting to break down data on total, not seclusion incidents, but total menace a student is in seclusion, seeing that, wait a minute, because how we're adjusting scripts and how we're using scripts and how we're addressing things based on what we know what's going on in a kid's life even, then we can take the seclusion minutes, the amount of time to de-escalate and return to class are reducing too. Or are they going up? And like, okay, well, that's a flag. And so, but our data lets us see those flags so we can reduce it.
And always with the idea that kids are restarting every 30 minutes. So like we, some kids, it used to be a rough morning and then it was like, well, what's the point of getting back on track? And, there's reason to get back on track and, 5 minutes, like fresh start. And we really try to promote that too, in terms of like, we're going to have escalated situations. That's while we're like supporting and growing students' coping abilities. But like in the meantime, when they come back, welcome them, have their stuff ready. They know where to check their schedule and what's kind of expected during that period. And, we're still trying to, tighten those systems and make sure we're, kind of all on board. And that's, I think, something that we've been really growing with in the last couple of years. So that's kind of, I think it's ever evolving still, but we're, I feel like we're in a good space to kind of keep pushing ourselves in that way and keep making the system better and stronger. I feel like that's what we're always kind of thinking through, like how to keep it fluid and efficient and things like that.
I think too. I just think with working with the care team spreadsheets in the last 5 years, and Eric Kurtz, who just has a brilliant mind at the ESC, and you can present an idea and he can put it into a spreadsheet that I truly believe in education in general, we've really pivoted to taking the time to look at the data because it tells a story, and it tells a powerful story about, a child or their family, their successes, their hurdles, and how we can pivot and wrap services around them to be successful. So, to hear what you guys are saying, I mean, gosh, I could hang out with you all day and days on end, because I just really think the data piece is huge. And the other thing that I'm most appreciative of is the fact that you have gotten your staff to buy in to. It's almost if we front load it now and we can see this child's progression, then there's a lot of reasons to celebrate, what's going on in the life of a child, and so I applaud you on what you have done. And I know I've just heard bits and pieces and talking to Val and Deb and different folks. And it's like, talk to Jeff and Kathleen because they've figured it out. And so it's really exciting. It's really exciting. Patty, what's your thoughts, or do you have any?
And Jeff, I think wanted to say something before. I'm going to ask just maybe 2 questions that I have for you, but Jeff, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do have another part that's really exciting. What year did you come from?
28. This is my 4th year.
4th year.
So can't do math.
Unfortunately, about a month ago, I had to suspend a child for a day for an incident that was an older child that was publicly done. One of those things. This is publicly seen. This is something we're going to have to work through. That was the first suspension since Kathleen came in. And we do not have in-school suspension. We stay in the rooms. There are no office referrals here. I'm in the hallways as a coach from 8 to 2 o'clock. I'm in the hallways, and Kathleen's in the building a lot, and we are coaching. Sometimes I'm coaching through a wall, through a cell phone. I'm listening on the other side, going, "Okay, maybe do this, maybe do this. Let's go to a visual script and cut communication and just kind of prompt." So that's it. It's really helped all because it's all going back to that common language and that common understanding of how we're going to approach something across the board.
Yes.
So, so you just said something. So say that again, because that's the outcome impact. Share that outcome impact, and you said 1 suspension in how many years?
4 years. 1 suspension in 4 years. We do not have an office referral system. We do not have in-school suspension. Everything is worked through based on decision making off of the matrix data and out of our care data team meetings every 10 days to keep kids in class.
That's amazing. And the other question I want to ask, because I come from that mental health lens, is that mental health counselor that's on your team, the amount of data that she must have to be able to guide, what do I need to do to impact their trauma triggers? What do I need to do? Is the medication need to be timed differently and things like that? Did they share with you, being involved on the team, how that has such an impact on even their treatment outcomes?
Absolutely.
I think so. Yeah.
Where I've also seen a support is it is a very effective tool to use in wraparound meetings, because then we can speak to other outside providers that might work with the family and yeah, it's
medication. I think is a biggie too, just because we've seen some just wild kiddos that have 100%, and then we know for a fact they haven't taken meds or something's been off, and literally you see these graphs just go and being look at this. We can't stress how important, the student hasn't had an escalated incident in months, and now we're here, and that's significant, and that's again more trauma that we're all of a sudden in a really hyper intense thing with the staff members that they really are close with, and all of that stuff. So just I don't know, I feel that's been
I've been in several parent meetings where we've seen changes in behavior, and to provide that data to a parent and to talk to the parent and say, we're noticing something. There was a rapid drop in the last couple of weeks, and said, we tried to adjust its medication or her medication,
or we ran out, or we forgot. And you're
on paper, it is a reality, and I'm not trying to put it in your face, but it is a reality. Here is a visual of what that looks like. Here's where we were. Here's where we're at.
So that's definitely I think that they definitely use that, and they really our ComQuest team is so awesome in so many ways, and just being part of building culture and doing fun, we're in a May countdown and supporting staff and students and fun things. And I don't know, I feel that has just that community building piece for us has been a really big part of I think morale. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's always sunshine and rainbows, because it's a really hard place to be too, because of just who we're what we're kind of working with, and the variety the variety of needs, but having those little things that I don't know, just feel more a typical school building too, when we're kind of a really unique building is really just feels awesome, I think, to staff, and has just been helpful in terms of just people feeling supported and loved and things like that. So I do, because I was just thinking of more outcome data. I have to share this because I don't know if you've seen it too, but this is always our big go-to is this is our restraint data too, from so 2018 2019 was pre-PBIS, and I know Pat, we've talked about this as with us, but just looking at that, at this time, in 2019 we were at 176 restraints, and that's year we're at 12. So, and that's significantly dropped.
That's including adding 4 more units to the program. Doubled in size.
So that's just, so we ended 2019 with 215, and we're on track to be kind of even under 20 this year. So again, we're, like I said, we're still looking at other kind of our other reactive responses in that seclusion piece. but we've got really good, consistent systems to respond to that and, make sure staff's, consistently supporting students through their escalation in a consistent way too. So I think that's, so staff and students kind of have a, know what to expect and don't feel as like, like how hard a crisis situation is and you don't know, maybe what to say. And so I think all of those pieces have really pulled together, but that's always something that like, I even like showed it to staff last month and we hadn't looked at it just cause like with January and February being a little crazy, like we didn't meet in the same way we had. And we were all like, I'm like, I literally get teary eyed every time I look at this. And people like, you can almost like hear people being like, oh my gosh, like I forgot this. Like I didn't look, like when we haven't reviewed it in a while, it's just like, I'm like, okay, we got to remember this. Like as hard as it is right now, like these are things that are significant and, we'll continue to, obviously we act in a safe way when we need to, but so don't not do that because of the data, but like this is, still so huge. So.
Wow. And as I'm thinking, it's like having some similarities to what you're doing in the other schools. So as those students transition, they have some similarities of structure and data tracking to support them like you've done.
That's the idea. Mirroring the like more like this other environments is still like a challenge that we're trying to but I feel like we've got, some cool transition plans out, in place and trying to find opportunity to slowly get kids to maybe see another environment in their district and things like that is always something we're working towards. I feel like, Jeff's come up with an awesome kind of transition planning for that too. So, but then, some students just really benefit from what we, kind of provide here too. So we always, take that into account too.
Amazing. Is
there anything you really want to leave our audience with that we'll have? A lesson learned, or if you're trying to get this started because 4 years ago you were trying to get this started, anything you need them to know?
I would invite anybody to come here for a tour.
Okay.
I think we've had a lot of other districts come to us to look at how they might be able to mirror pieces, knowing they have students here, and so I get really excited about coming and giving tours and talking about it because there's so much more. It's that whole part of student incentive and reinforcers and what we use and school store and building wide activities and just all that other fun. When we talk about data, and a lot of times when I talk to parents about it, it's like, well, this is all. At first, I present all the data piece and how we collect data, and this is the sheet you're going to get home because that matrix is a hard copy paper that can go home every day to every family. And then with that, this is all like great. And you're like, oh wow, yeah, we can find trends. We can see what time of day. We can see if it's transition. We can see if it's day of the week or are they just tired or all these things. Then we get to like, okay, there's a fun kid part because that percentage doesn't mean you're making or breaking your day, which a lot of times is not a good thing to do for a student with a traumatic background. And so there's always that reinforcer of being able to regain and restart. And so there are fun things tied to that. There are tangibles tied to that. There are opportunities tied. So you get to come around and see how those things are developing, what staff are doing with that at a classroom level and what we're doing with that at a building level too.
And I feel like something that Val said when we first started, and she was like, we kind of like called her over to be like, hey, we're in this sort of unique place, like help us kind of think through. She was like, really, when we don't quite fit in like the exact box, but the framework is still supportive. And she was like, tier 1 is 3 to 5 years to like really get off. So just like those small, like how small changes and continuing then to be like, oh, even year 1, we're like, let's just take data. Let's get in the habit of taking it. Even if we're not necessarily like using it as like, I don't know, as well as maybe we are now, but like, and I feel like just even the act of taking data is all of a sudden like just kind of starts like, I don't know, informing and clicking for people to be like, oh, I have a different awareness. This maybe seemed worse than I thought it was, or I thought it was happening more frequently than it was. Cause when it happens, it's really hard. But then it's like, oh, most of the day is actually going okay. So again, just building that awareness and even just starting like small with like maybe taking, small chunks of data in a way that's most applicable to that setting. Cause we know in, gen ed settings are bigger rooms and things like that. So just finding ways that maybe, they can have a measurement that might indicate need or things like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the time, and we'll definitely work with this content. And I think one of my thoughts too is not only, offering, as you shared, Jeff, and maybe making sure that statement's in there, that they can come for a tour to check it out. But I'm wondering even if there's ever any of those sheets that you did share, and we'll make sure that Matt's able to show those. But if you do want them, we'll have a Google folder with additional resources and things. If there's anything you want to share with the audience, we can send them to that Google folder, or if there is something you want to share with them.
Cool. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just congratulations on it. It's a journey. It's a journey to make change, and what I love is that Kathleen, you've been there for 4 years. Jeff, you've been there for years. However many long but it's that longevity of seeing the child and seeing the family, and just realizing what else can we do to make sure that they can come to the classroom and they're ready to learn. And it's beautiful.
I do have one more thing to say. You just prompted something else. There was a conversation I had with a supervisor at Nicodemo, I believe it was. My job had evolved from, this is my year 7, but this evolved from being a supervisor of programs everywhere, of ED programs specifically. And I was traveling all over the district. And we had some conversations about not being in the building much, because if there's a due process in the district, I have to go there. And if I'm observing other teachers in other districts, I have to go there. And if I'm enrolling, IEP. And so my office was here, but my title was not really principal. I was supervisor of programs. This is where I parked myself. And there were a couple of really good decisions made by the ESC people above me 4 years ago. And one of the conversations we started, and I'm not going to take the name away, but to show where it's gone, is there was a conversation at one point that said, should we look at getting an SRO in the building? And I said, no. I didn't know really what the answer was to that, but I was like, I don't want to go down that route. First thing is, I think I would like to be in the building more. So they restructured, and they said, Jeff, don't leave the sidewalk. You stay at day all day. Thank you. And then I really see, and maybe not this black and white, but I didn't get an SRO. I got Kathleen Toth. So, but if you look at that side and that mindset of what direction we could have gone and where we were going with programming, to all the proactive things and all the reflective thought on where we were going and how we wanted to support this school, it's all worked out really, really good.
More admin time and add a behavior
special, like a behavior intervention specialist or
behavior intervention specialist. Yeah.
And I think that you are seeing that actually in districts are trying to kind of have that more like focused behavioral personnel within the buildings too. Cause that's, I think, just where we're at. Like, I think having that and being able to proactively coach people through, instead of just trying to Band-Aid, perhaps, not to say an SRO isn't available, but like their ability to respond is on that reactive end. So finding more ways to proactively support teachers, empower teachers, things like that, and to do all those antecedent, kind of environmental strategies and things like that. I think is like the big kind of, picture, and finding space and time for that is, I think, hard. So, or feels hard. But like you said, the time's worth it.
Hearing the focused time to be able to look at through the data, the antecedents, what's the why behind the behavior. Being able to have that time is what we've heard, I think, consistently across all our interviews, and have people that specialize in it. Yeah.
One way or the other, you're going to take the time. So whether if you'd rather be doing that proactively than, like we've kind of mentioned that putting out fires is traumatic, stressful, just not a good place for anybody that, to be for you know, a long time or repeatedly. So,
yeah. Well, we just, like I said, thank you so much. I mean, on this afternoon, just taking time to just chat with us and